fear is the mind killer. Where the fear is gone, only I will remain.
Go, go, go!
And today we have, after quite literally over a year's worth of delays, we have Dune. So Dune, I guess now we're saying Dune technically is a 2021 release. This film was supposed to come out over a year ago, and due to, COVID and obvious, box office audience limitations, it was delayed. So overall, I think it was a good move, similar to what No Time to Die and many other films did, like The King's Man coming out soon. These films were just put off a little bit longer until it was safer to go out and get more people and also get a bigger return on your box office investments here. As the thumbnail suggests, I think they knocked it out of the park. Let's get into it first. Director, Denis Villeneuve, or Denis Villeneuve, or if you want to get all fancy with it, no, just Denis Villeneuve, I'm going to say. Probably a little bit wrong, but anyway, what did this guy do? Oh, only my favorite movie of all time, Blade Runner 2049, which, I have a lot of favorite movies, but right now, gun to my head, you had to ask me, Blade Runner is my favorite movie of all time, hence the get up, which, I felt like a long coat was necessary for this, but also it just happens to coincide with the director, so cool. The man who directed this film, both films, genius. I think he's a craftsman in his prime. He is a fucking artist, honestly, when it comes to the films that he creates on screen. And Dune is no exception, but I'll get into that in a moment. We have a very large ensemble cast, and due to that, I don't want to overshadow any of the other performers, but I will focus on the core, actual bloodline family here. So the film, as you probably already know, stars Timothée Chalamet, who has a prestigious film career as well. In addition to that, the mother, Rebecca Ferguson, she's been in stuff. I think she was even in, whatchamacallit, I'm pretty sure she was the leading lady in Reminiscence, which we covered on the channel, but Rebecca Ferguson is in it, as well as the father, Oscar Isaac, the core members of the House of Atreides. By the way, I'm probably going to say things wrong and all that. I'm not a Dune aficionado, so bear with me if I mispronounce anything, but I'll try not to. The main family and literally every actor in this film does a phenomenal job. No problems with that. Like, performances are great. Our leading young man, who's the thinnest kid in the galaxy, I think. In addition to everybody else, even the ancillary characters, people that are just in it for one shot or a few, or everybody does a great job. Performances are stellar, very emotionally driven throughout, and they really help solidify the narrative that we're focusing on for this film. I've been reiterating my opinion over and over again because people have been asking me, coming and going, whether at work, at home, and social life and all this. Here's the thing. So going into this, just know this is my opinion on the film. I know that critics are already looking at it in a good light, and audiences even more so. There are some qualms to be had by some people, but this is my opinion. My gut opinion getting out of Dune is this. I think Dune was a footstep away from being a masterpiece, not only in film, but also cinema. I thought critics were exaggerating when they said Dune was an experience. I went opening night and saw it in IMAX because everybody, even the director, was like, you have to go see it in IMAX. You have to go, terrible French accent, I know. He said, go see it in IMAX, mon chéri. But I went in IMAX, I saw it opening night. When I tell you that this film, when you let yourself sink into it, is an experience, like a visual and auditory, just overall experience. Like, they weren't kidding. It really is. Now, I get, not to belittle anybody out there in the world, but would your average film goer feel this way? Or somebody who just sees one trailer or a poster as they walk down the street on the way to football practice? Probably not. I don't know if they'd feel the same way. Maybe I'm wrong, but my opinion, being a cinephile, quite the experience. And as a film itself, going into this, I have not read a single sentence out of any book in the Dune series, franchise, what have you. Didn't even see the original movie. That was in, the early 80s or whatever. I never saw the movie, never read the books. I know nothing aside from what a trailer would show me. And even then, the trailers were actually good marketing because they didn't show me what was going to happen. All I knew was a boy destined for potential greatness, houses in a galaxy in conflict and all of this. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I went in completely blind. As a guy going in completely blind to this brand new franchise, the way they handled this as an introduction was surprisingly excellent. Like, from a lore perspective, a story perspective, characters, houses, I mean, I would almost go as far as to say their introduction of all this was smoother than Game of Thrones in season 1. Like, to be able to initiate me into this story, lore, and world, I never felt lost. I never felt they were going too fast. They were able to, I was on board whenever new information was presented or new items were shown or characters or things, whether it was outright explained to you what something did or whether you could visually figure it out and put it all together. It was excellent. It was a perfect job of getting me into the series. I care about Dune now. I don't know if I'll ever read the books, but I legit, halfway through this film, I was like, this is, for me anyway, this is the next sci-fi epic. Like, it's so hard to find and, like, get, like, really, like, actually good science fiction out there and all that. I mean, Blade Runner, of course, I yak about that film every chance that I get. To get something like this, it reminded me of, again, my opinion, it reminded me of what Star Wars used to be like back in the day. Not like, you know, the last 3 films and all that. They're their own thing. But this was like, you have the stage is set for, you know, just this narrative of like there's politics in here, but there's also drama. There's little bits of humor sprinkled throughout for mild relief. There's some action sequences, but it is not an action film. And there's also like this just general conflict. It's also a Greek tragedy. It's also this coming of age. It's also a sci-fi epic. It's also a visual and auditory like experience. Like, it's everything I would want in a film, and especially everything that I want in a sci-fi film. Like, I did not think I was going to enjoy this movie as much as I did, and it just worked on every level for me. And to get more into world building, like, dude, the color palettes, people's costumes, whether it was like the official regal officer for like uniforms or battle armor of, you know, more hostile clans and all this, or based on where people lived, they dressed differently, but it was all like visually interesting and all worked for an aesthetic. And all the equipment they used, the ships they flew in, the scale of some of these buildings and huge like intergalactic travel ships, like, it was. The movie overall was superbly fascinating for me. Even if we only went to a world and were at that world for like 2 minutes, it was like, okay, I want to know more about that world and the characters within it. But yeah, the budget on this film, I shudder to think of how much money went into this film. But you can tell they went into making places feel real or lived in or nice or decrepit. Like, a lot of money. And the visual effects, holy shit, dude, the effects in this film, like, ooh, some really killer effects. Not everything looked real. Everything, for what it was in the universe within it, everything was real and believable and didn't look shitty. Even like these like built-in shields everybody has, like, that was cool too, because then even when people had shields, it added a visual layer to combat to kind of like help you not get too lost. Whenever there was action, it wasn't too cutty or choppy or anything. There weren't a lot of like blenderous one takes, but things were filmed in a way where everything that happened on screen was very clear as it was happening. Very similar world building to Game of Thrones, although I would say Game of Thrones was a much more arduous project, because Game of Thrones has even more houses, and especially in the earlier seasons, I mean, I remember being lost in like character, house, family, side character, a night over here. There was a lot to absorb. With this, there's still a lot to absorb with the Dune universe, but they make it so it's not, I don't want to use the term bite-sized, they make it so that it's all easily digestible, basically. Like, whatever they're throwing your way, you're able to pick up easily enough. I think if you're at least somewhat familiar with, like, you know, how films work and how you can pick up unusual narrative and character concepts, and they make it so that it's very good. It's good at an entry level for somebody like me. The only possible issues that I could have, to the credit, I've discussed the film with a couple people who weren't as huge of fans of it as I was, and I kind of get it, but and so it changed my opinion a little bit. only a tiny bit, because I do agree. There's a character or two here or there that could have used a bit more development, or I would have liked to have seen more from them. But, you know, one serves the purpose of existing and then dying, and another person is a character who exists in this film and clearly is going to be a presence in subsequent films going forward. Because this is a part one, by the way, in case I meant to preface that. This, since, like, from what I understand, again, this is my understanding, Dune, there's the one main book of Dune, and then all the other books are offshoots of Dune in the same universe. So when the credits roll on this one, it says Dune Part 1. I don't know if Part 2 is going to be the final part or if it's a 3-part series, but I believe this is all for the narrative of the primary story of Dune. And so I know that they're going to probably save more character development and action for subsequent films. And I still have to hold this film accountable, though, because you want your film to be able to stand on its own two legs without having to rely on other, films to continue it or finish it for you. So I do have to kind of I would have liked a bit more development from a couple characters. I feel like there were some characters that, even though they weren't around a long time, they served their purpose and were sufficient for the story, and then some for their impact on it. Even there's a part of the finale that feels a little bit anticlimactic, because I mean the movie, obviously, since I said part one, the end of this film leaves it open for the part two to come later. I don't think it leaves it too open-ended. I think it still ends this chapter fairly well, but it also was a bit anticlimactic. It could have been building to something. Might have had a stronger finisher at the end there and didn't. That's that's the only two notes I have for this whole film, is it could have had a more climactic or a stronger ending, or it could have had a bit more development here and there for characters. But aside from that, I consider Dune to be a near cinematic masterpiece. I loved it, and I'm pleasantly surprised by how much I loved it. Color grading in the film, cinematography, the palettes, the characters, the acting, the universe, the world building, lore building, all of it. It was just, I was engaged, I was fascinated whenever these sequences started or things became kind of surreal with the auditory and the visuals and all that. It's not your typical film, but in the best of ways. It kind of just, it's hard to put into exact words, but I cannot recommend enough going to go see this film in theaters, preferably in IMAX, because IMAX, you literally get a larger screen, and it's shot for IMAX, so you see more in a lot of these shots as well. So please, if you like good movies, I would say go see it. I don't know if you'll love it as much as I would. I think your average or below average moviegoer might consider parts of the film a bit of a slow burn, or just kind of a bit slower, and I get it. It's not your typical space sci-fi epic. It's not as quick and fast as Star Wars, at least the more modern Star Wars, and it's not quite to the same scale of epic space opera with these huge climactic, sword swinging fights or whatever, but it's a really good film. It's a cinematic experience, and if you let yourself get invested in the characters, and if you're interested in the stories that are going to unfold, these houses and these characters and all this, you're going to be in for a treat. If you want to find a movie that'll tick MovieMan's boxes, surprisingly, this did it. Something like Blade Runner did. This director has my heart, apparently, on a little dangled string, because this movie did it as well. And I cannot wait for, I don't know when it's going to happen, maybe next year, but I can't, or maybe 2 years, who knows, but I'm very excited for the day that part 2 will come out. In the meantime, to be fair, like I said, I had a couple notes here and there, not major complaints, but just enough to slightly dock it. So for that reason, this is a first. Going out of the film, I thought perfection, nothing wrong. Giving it some time to analyze and work through some of anything I could find. Just grasping for straws of is there anything wrong with this movie in my eyes? I did find a couple notes, and for that reason, I give Dune a very, I don't even want to say low, but a solid low, a low 5 out of 5. It is, like I said, I'm not exaggerating, a footstep away from perfection. I think with the ending tweaked a little bit, and a character or two here built up a bit more. Maybe if there was a director's cut, perhaps, or maybe if there's some more scenes written I didn't know of, or that they could have put in there, it would have been complete 5 out of 5 masterpiece. But in the meantime, I'd still say low 5 out of 5 is hella good. So if you have 2 hours and 30 or 40 minutes or whatever, and you're a fan of sci-fi, you like Dune in general, what tells me they did a good job is that I was sitting next to two Dune fans in this movie, and they thought that it was the most faithful adaptation of the source material so far, which tells me that the people who made this movie give a shit, and they did a fucking amazing job of doing it. So props to every single person involved in making Dune. You've gotten a new fan. Over 20 years, I've never given a shit about the Dune series, and now I do. So the fact that you did that with one film, bravo. My thoughts on Dune: a low 5 out of 5, a near masterpiece. Go see it in theaters. Please support this film. I'm definitely gonna buy it when it comes out, and if I get even the smallest excuse of a chance to go see it again in theaters, preferably in IMAX again, doing it for sure, doing it. But in the meantime, thank you guys and gals so much for watching as always, and that's my review of Dune. Stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie review that I do. Like, I got at least 1 or 2 more, I think, spooky films coming out by the end of October in terms of, like, reviewing them for the channel, so stay tuned for that. This month might be the record for most movie reviews done in 1 month, just because so many of them have been coming out. So, as always, thank you for the support, thank you for watching, and stay tuned. Goodbye, travelers.